Africa, the cradle of humanity and renowned for its wildlife. It could also be the origin of the next global pandemic. It's well known that animals and people living close together is a recipe for disease. But exactly which diseases and if any new ones are creeping into the system, that's what they're investigating here in Western Kenya. They're called zoonotic diseases, infections that can jump from animals to people.
There are lots of zoonotic infections. In fact, about 60% of all human diseases are of zoonotic origin.
In recent years, we've seen SARS, bird flu, even HIV, AIDS and Ebola seeming to appear from nowhere with catastrophic results. In fact, all these diseases and many others have jumped from animals to people. So this team, headed by ep04, is taking a much closer look at the health of people and livestock in a densely populated region of Western Kenya.
It seems to be obvious that zoonotic infections will occur more in people who keep livestock than in those who don't.
If you look around here, you don't see the cattle in a field. Cattle are tethered within the compound that everybody's working in. It's a much more integrated system than anything we really see at home.
The kinds of problems that this environment creates are readily apparent.
This is an area of interaction between croplands and the animals, and you can see behind those fields is some forest, and there might be a watercourse flowing through that forest, for example. That's where the exciting things happen from a disease transmission point of view.
Part of the team focus on human health, taking a range of samples from people in the village, as well as a detailed account of their medical history and current living situation.
Supras enlarged on the left.
Meanwhile, others in the team have a look at the livestock.
The problem is that a lot of these diseases cause signs which are very similar to other human diseases like malaria and human tuberculosis. So we're just trying to find out what diseases she has and what are shared with the people that she lives with. She's quite healthy, so we'll see what she might have been carrying, and we can tell you later in the lab.
Samples are taken back to field laboratories in the town of Busia on the Ugandan border.
We've got a human lab and an animal lab next door where we process the material that comes in from the field. And one of the things that we really need to do is look at fresh material, because once the samples get a bit old, the parasites become a bit difficult to identify. And the second important thing is results that we get in the lab here are used directly by the clinicians working in the field to decide what treatments they should be giving people.
This detailed look at the community health of a whole region is showing many expected results and a few surprises.
One of the diseases that we're testing for, which is actually a zoonotic infection, is brucellosis. It's a bacterial infection. Looking at the official reports, there isn't any brucellosis really in this region, but we have detected brucellosis both in animals and in people. That's telling us that there are things circulating here that official records don't pick up.
There seems to be a lot of malaria about, but Eric's team are finding that many cases are masking something much more sinister.
Often, it won't be malaria, it will be something else, and there are a multitude of different pathogens that cause fever of the type that malaria also causes. That's a real problem, because somebody with a low income might need to, say, sell one of their animals to then go to the clinic, get a diagnosis, buy some anti-malarial drugs. They don't work, so they go back to a different clinic or to a traditional healer, and so on, 5, 6, 7 times, and then finally they get properly diagnosed when they're in the late stage of their infection, and it would have been much easier to treat them if they'd been caught earlier on.
It's a very complex picture that is emerging, and one that could be simplified by some basic technology.
30% of our participants don't have access to a latrine, and that's even just a basic pit latrine. And that's something that could be quite easily sorted out with some education and some money, and would sort out all sorts of other diarrheal diseases, which are one of the huge killers of young children in Africa.
Being the continent where humans evolved, this is where people have had the longest exposure to animals. It's also the home of our closest relatives, another potential source for zoonotic diseases. Add to that mix people living in close proximity to domesticated animals, and Africa becomes a dangerous hotspot for new human disease. Back in Nairobi, another team is taking a different look at the spread of diseases across East Africa. Apollinaire de Jenkin heads up a team collecting samples of animals and people from a wide swathe across Kenya.
At the moment, we're trying to cover the East African region, but of course, we would like to expand this to other parts of Africa.
The first step in the labs is to figure out exactly what spread of diseases are present in their samples.
You are able to look at the complex composition of viruses, other pathogens or other small organisms that exist in there. And doing it that way, you are able to come up with a catalogue of potential organisms that exist in there.
This analysis goes deep into the DNA of the infecting organisms. Using the new sciences of genomics and metagenomics, minute changes in the pathogen's genetic makeup can be identified and tracked. This allows Apollinaire's team to follow the spread of individual strains of each disease. With so many samples from such a wide geographical area, and with so much information for each individual sample, these guys are dealing with a lot of data. And so they've brought in $4 million worth of computing grunt. All this high technology is dedicated to building a complex picture of the diseases of Central Africa.
Genomics and metagenomics at the moment help us to look for the ones that we don't know, at the same time confirming the presence or the absence of the ones that we know.
Several teams are looking very closely at zoonotic diseases in Kenya. Some of this work has immediate local benefits.
Not only are we gathering data that's going to progress the science, but we're also helping the people that we're working with in terms of diagnosing their infections and giving them drugs and helping their animals.
While the future of this work will have impacts around the world.
I think now we have to put this work in the context of the global effort, trying to make sure that even remote parts of the area do have resources and capabilities to begin to do good and accurate diagnostics of what could be emerging.
The next big disease problem is very likely to be a zoonotic disease, so doing this sort of work and then leaving it isn't an option. This is the start of something, and we'll build on it from here.